What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the TDR Show. Me and Jay Stein are back. We are having some fun tonight. I apologize for the last week. I know we haven't had a show out there, but I had some medical stuff pop up. But I am about 90%, well, 75%. But we're jumping in anyway. We're gonna have some fun tonight. We're doing a 2026 rookie mock draft, so we're diving into that 2026 class. And we're going to do all kinds of stuff. We're going to do a 4-round mock because we're degenerates here. We're going to be talking about kind of player value, pick value, talking about kind of how we would kind of manage the 2026 class right now, and some pitfalls, right? We're going to be talking about lackluster, maybe wide receiver group, and some big question marks at the tight end spot, and even at the QB spot, as I've been writing about them. So we're going to have some fun. We're doing a deep dive 2026 mock here. Stay here on the channel if you're on the podcast. Thank you for listening. All right, before we get into the first round, before we dive into the players, we do want to talk about like, hey, what is our big overarching thoughts here in terms of the class as a whole? And the one thing that I will say off the top, and I wrote about this in our Substack that you could get, I wrote about May 9th. So about a couple weeks ago, I wrote a flip your 2026 picks, dynasty moves that win titles. And essentially, I looked and broke down every first round, even second round picks of some guys you can go out there and get right now in drafts and even in your league mates and out there do it. Because in my opinion, when you're looking at the market of the 2026 class, there's a lot of question marks. Jay's going to talk about that in terms of each position. We're going to kind of go through it, but there's so many question marks with it. I think there's a lot of players right now in win now mode, or even like players and assets out there that would be the wide receiver one of the 26 class if we looked at it, right? Like for example, in a league that I'm in this today, I traded a 2026 first, early second, and a fourth for Drake London and Trey Benson. So I got Drake London because I looked at it like that's that win now asset that I want. And I'll give up a projected mid first for next year. Now, most people are saying I won that deal. Who knows what's going to happen? We'll see, but that's just how Dynasty goes. But I am putting my skin in the game when I talk about this. Like I am actively looking to move my 2026 picks. Now we're going to talk about why that is, who these players are, but just off the top, that's how I look at the 2026 class right now. Is I'm okay selling these picks right now for some assets. What is your overarching thoughts of this class, Jay?
Two things. Kevin, so happy you're healthy or getting healthy. 75% Kevin Coleman is better than most analysts. So thank you for coming back. The second thing is we just finished rookie season, but rookie season's dead. Long live the next rookie season. We're going to start in 2026 here. I'm excited about it. And yeah, I think the overall point of view or point that we want to make here is this is a very questionable 2026 class. Going through all the data and all of the prospects here, there are very few high caliber, high quality prospects that like we know for sure already. Like a lot of times when you get to this point in the cycle, you have some guys that have done most of what you needed to see, and they have projected draft capital that looks good. And that's just not the case this year. In 2026, there's going to be a lot of question marks. And really that comes down to more than anything is we're going to see what this 2025 season brings us. And that might sway how a lot of these prospects end up getting ordered when it comes to making those picks next May, June, whatever your rookie 2026 drafts are, is more so than ever. What happens in the season might change how we order these things. And so I'm excited. I love diving into this and we went 4 rounds. So we're really deep in here. You might have some question marks. You might say, oh, this guy shouldn't have gone in the 4th round. He should have gone in the 2nd round. But really, honestly, there's a ton of question marks right now. It's kind of pick your flavors, pick the guys you like. But we try to lay out all 4 rounds to kind of give you guys an idea of sort of, what is the top of these, Devy drafts, the top of 2026 draft should look like from a 2026 perspective-ish kind of thing.
Yeah. And if you remember when we did the Devy mock and we were talking about it, a lot of our picks were all 2027 guys off the top. So that's when you get into the 2026 class. There's just not those. You hit it on the head with like surefire prospects. This guy's going in the top 5. I know it. there's just not that in the class. And everybody too, as we get into this, we're going to get in the first round. Arch Manning's not involved in this. So we just said he's 2027 for now. Like that's what all signs point to. And if you guys want to argue, just put him at 101. That's fine. You can just say it and just move everybody down one, because he would be 101. Like if I knew Arch was coming out right now, he'd be 101. Then we can move everything down there. Now, as far as the mock goes, it's a 12-team super flex. Not really tied in premium. It's more just, hey, 12-team super flex. Let's throw some guys in there and see how it goes. Now, we know we do rankings like this. So if this is the first time you've listened to this pod or done it on the YouTube channel, we know these guys. We've been ranking these guys for 3 years, basically. And I will say this, we've had trouble with this class for 3 years, especially at the wide receiver position. It's been brutal. And it's just one of those things. So that's what you're going to see here. So let's get in the first round. So let's dive in here. So off the top, we got Lenore Sellers, quarterback out of South Carolina. At 102, we have Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame. 103 is Darius Taylor, running back out of Minnesota. 104 is Nick Singleton, running back out of Penn State. 105 is Drew Aller, QB, Penn State. 106 is Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State. 107 is Jonah Coleman, running back, Washington Huskies. 108 is Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. 109 is Cade Klubnik. 110 is Sam Levitt out of Arizona State. Cade is out of Clemson. 111 is Bryson, Washington, out of Baylor. He's a running back. And then Garrett Nussmeier at 112, LSU quarterback. First thing, Jay, way too many quarterbacks, bro. I don't know what we were doing here, but this just tells me we don't know who to draft, so we're just going to draft the quarterbacks because they're going to bump up in value.
Yeah, and this, like Dynasty seasoned experts that play in Superflex leagues, that's what this is.
Yeah.
You want to hit on the incredible value of a quarterback. And sometimes you can't pass those up, especially if at other positions there's some question marks. But yeah, for us, we generally tend to sort of avoid those QBs, and here we have a bunch of maybe QBs that might end up hit and get give us that value that we're looking for. And so as far as I can tell, we got Drew Aller, Lenore Sellers, Sam Levitt, Cade Klubnik, and Garrett Nussmeier all going in this round. That is kind of my grouping. That's kind of my tier.
Yeah.
I think I like Garrett Nussmeier the least out of all those things, but there's upside there because if you go and look at all the mock drafts, if you listen to the draft pundits, they're high on Garrett Nussmeier. Nussmeier's in the top 15, maybe top 10 of where you're seeing most mock drafts him go. So I think you do have to include that. That has to be part of your process. He could be a guy that goes off in LSU system. I think what's interesting about the quarterbacks this year, Drew Aller, Sam Levitt, Cade Klubnik, I think, and Lenore Sellers, I think those were all really, really interesting stories and interesting profiles. Each of them have their kind of warts. They're not exactly perfect in all those things, but there is an interesting group. And if we see good seasons, I think those guys will all be have the potential to be drafted highly in the first round or in the first round and maybe get a chance in the NFL. So I like all of those. We've talked about Cade's got great supporting cast this season. Year one was okay. Year two for Cade, year three for Cade was actually quietly really, really good. So if you go through and look at the numbers in year three on Cade, that's really good. So I'm expecting him to do well. Sam Levitt in year two is pretty good. Lenore Sellers has just got that. He's got the physical profile that he could do something different. And if you're going for the upside, I love a Lenore Sellers bet as well. So the quarterbacks, we have a lot of them. That tells you a little bit about how we think about some of the other positions. But there's definitely some upside here if we get some good performance out of these guys.
Yeah, so one thing is, I've dived into these guys. So I've written big profiles for our Substack for Sellers, for Aller, for Nussmeier, and Klubnik. And I'm writing a couple more. I haven't got the Levitt yet. I will. Fernando Mendoza, I'm going to get to. The one thing I will say with Sellers that he's just up here because of potential, right? Like I understand that you might not want him in the 101. He still has a long way to go from a quarterback perspective in terms of like throwing the football, right? I think that he plays too fast because he can run a lot. He's overconfident in his arm talent at times. Like I think that he had 19 turnover worthy plays last year, according to PFF. That's not amazing, right? Anticipation, because last year was really his first year starting. like anticipation and timing routes, those type of things, touch. Like he's got to improve that. But from a pure like holy crap ceiling play, athleticism and arm talent, strength, Lenoris is up there, right? So I think that garners like, hey, if Arch isn't in this class, why can't it be Sellers there? The one guy that I probably have taken away from my article and my research and just the film and all 22 and all that I've really come away not as impressed on is Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know what it is. I think there are times in his game that he makes poor decisions. The arm talent isn't necessarily out there. Like, and I think I talked about it in the article I wrote about. I said, he does a lot of things average. I don't know if there's an elite skill there, elite tool yet. Like, could be, but I think the numbers tell us too. It's not really, nothing really stands out to you there for him. So like, that's the question mark. I think Cade has a potential to make a lot of money though. Klubnik from Clemson, Antonio Williams, Wesco, TJ Moore. He's got all those guys there. Gideon Davidson, the true freshman running back. Like, he's going to have a ton of weapons there. Solid offensive line. He can make you a lot of money there. All right. Besides the quarterbacks, where do you going to go? Do you want to talk about the running backs or wide receivers? Because we only got 2 wide receivers in this group.
Yeah, so with the quarterbacks, there's some maybe high upside guys here, but I would say that the position I'm most confident in is the running backs here, this top end of the running backs. I like this group of running backs. I think Darius Taylor, Jeremiah Love, we have Jeremiah Love, Darius Taylor, I think are pretty good, and Nick Singleton all in the first 5 picks. So pick 2, pick 3, pick 4. I think that just displays at least I tried to drive it home here with the even picks, is that I like the prospects of these running backs. I think that they make good profiles. We need to see them perform, obviously, of course. But Darius Taylor has a rock solid profile. Jeremiah Love has a really good profile. Nick Singleton coming back for that 4th year, had a really good freshman year, had a pretty good last season, especially picked up from a receiving perspective. Those are some really good profiles. I love the Jonah Coleman profile from a data perspective. I was sad to see him go for you took him right there. I like Jonah Coleman. I think he's a sleeper. I don't think he gets selected in the first round very often. So I like that from a profile perspective. So yeah, I'm really excited about the top end of this running back class. I think there's some really good prospects. I think if you get a really good performance out of some of these guys, like Darius Taylor and Jeremiah Love, I think there's a potential for those guys to get into the tier 1 level type prospect. Those guys that you're debating taking over quarterbacks in Superflex. But you just need to see one more year. But those are out of all of the guys across all these positions, those guys are the ones that have that potential to potentially be those tier 1 guys.
So this is what I wanted to talk to you about with the running backs. So I'm glad we started talking about this a little bit because I want to get into Jonah Coleman too. So there's some question marks with these guys. I want to go on the other side too. I think sometimes podcasts or even channels, they always talk about, oh, this guy is this, he's great, but they don't go to the opposite side there. Jeremiah Love, and Christian gives me a lot of shit for this. Christian, he's here at the Devy Royale. He tells me I'm a hater. I'm not a hater with Jeremiah Love, but I do think that I worry about the explosiveness. I worry about he definitely wore down last year when they had a lot of injuries in that running back room, so it was really him. And to be honest with you, like Jadarian Price is pretty good running back, and I think Jadarian Price and Neas Williams, like they're back healthy, are going to push Love for some of that volume. So like my thing is with Love, like I think that he is. He's not as a player. I haven't done comps yet, so please don't yell at me. But I think like Trey Benson type draft capital, maybe like that Trey Benson or 2nd, 3rd round. Like I know some are talking about him being a 1st round back. I'm not there yet with him in terms of that. So that's why I'm a little bit more nervous there. Darius Taylor, same thing. So I'll go through all my cons and you can go wherever you want. But Darius Taylor for me, still needs to see that production, right? And I think the explosiveness thing for him too is a real thing, like that long speed explosiveness, which is a little overrated for running backs. But production wise, you want to see him get over 1,000 yards. You want to see him kind of be a bit better, pass catcher. Nick Singleton, I wish he would have came out fourth year guy, going to split time with Katrin Allen, is a good pass catcher now. He's kind of turned into that. Was a very good runner last year. But is that a product of Penn State's system, what they were trying to do with him? Still sharing time, kind of that timeshare, right? And I don't think he's the level of athlete that like Travion Henderson was, as we saw at Ohio State with Judkins. And then Jonah, the thing with Jonah is he might be the running back one, Jay. Like, we might just be sleeping on Jonah's profile overall because as a runner, film base, everything stands out about him. I know the metrics stand out. I know he's going to be a fourth-year guy, but it would not shock me, like, we're sitting here next year talking about the 26 class and someone saying, oh, yeah, Jonah Coleman was the first running back taken in April. Like, that wouldn't shock me based on where we're at right now.
Yeah, and we know the coach up there likes him, and they're going to use him. And I think this might be a big year for Jonah Coleman. But yes, I agree. There's knocks on each one of these profiles. Like we said at the beginning, there's no like perfect prospects. There's no like great, absolute perfect things. But Jeremiah, there are things to like about his profile. 6.4 yards per attempt. 4.23 yards after contact per attempt this season, 160.3 elusive rating from him. Those are pretty nice stuff. Darius Taylor is a giant portion of Minnesota's offense. If you think about what Caleb Johnson meant to Iowa's offense, it's kind of a little bit of what Darius Taylor kind of means to Minnesota's offense. But over the last 2 years, in terms of yards per team play, rush yards over expected, dominator rating, backfield dominator rating, he's getting above the age or experience adjusted line in all of those categories. So this is a profile that stands out really high in my process. The stuff that he doesn't do as well with is the stuff that like Jeremiah Love does really well, which is like some of that like efficiency, breaking tackles, stuff like that. The elusiveness, you don't see that, say like the PFF numbers from Darius Taylor throughout his profile. But the market share stuff, you see a lot of that in his profile, which if I'm being honest, the Darius Taylor, if I had to do it, if I had to rank him right now, I'd probably put Darius Taylor as my RB1 just because of him having all of that market share at Minnesota. And now when I went through and picked it, I picked Jeremiah Love because if you're out there and you're doing the ADP and you're looking and seeing these 2026 drafts, you see Jeremiah Love in most like Devy drafts go in the first round. You see Darius Taylor go in the second round, mid-second round sometimes. There's a lot of people sleeping on Darius Taylor. But if you look at my process, I think Darius Taylor probably RB1 so far. Like I said, you got to see what happens this season. But yeah, I like that pick at 3.
Yeah, no, and to your point, I mean, I've had Darius Taylor at my 1 for a while, and in Love and Singleton, but they're all in the same tier, and I think Jonah's too low for me. I'm going to move Jonah up. The one guy you wanted me to mention is Bryson Washington, because I took him a little earlier than Jay thought I should take him. So I do want to mention, excuse me. Oh man, I'm dying right now. Look at that. See, you got me all coughed up here. So Bryson Washington, Baylor running back, 6'203". He's basically a redshirt sophomore this year. Last year was his true year. 175 carries, 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 217 yards receiving. The thing with him is all projection, and the back end of the first is so disgusting. And like even us, me and Jay I was texting. I was like, this is gross. He's like, yes, this is very gross. Like, because when you start getting down here, you start reaching for guys you're projecting here. And the thing is, I think he could take that next step. 1,000 yards is basically a freshman. I know he's a redshirt freshman. Last year, like you looking at a guy that if he can get up to 210, 215 pounds, he's probably 5'11", 6. I would argue he's probably 5'11", 200 right now. But if you can get up a little bit more in the weight, then you'd be good there. I think that when you're looking at Baylor's offense with Sawyer Robertson, who also is a sleeper in the quarterback class this year, I think that offense can take off. I think he's going to get 200 carries. Bryson to me is just a fun late round pick here, especially being young, right? There's some older guys we draft after this, but I don't mind taking the upshot for that young 3-year prospect.
Yeah, I mean, he had a really good season last year. I think he had about 94-ish yards per game for the season, above 4 yards after contact per attempt. I liked it. I think it's a sleeper pick. I don't see the love right now in terms of draft capital, and so you need that. So that you got to think about some of these how you come up with a strategy for this stuff, right? So right now, if you pick players that already are assuming they have the high draft capital, like you go to mock draft database, they're getting draft capital because people are mocking them in those places. They kind of don't have to get over that hump. So Bryson Washington, I don't think he has what most people would view as draft capital. I think they have him pretty far down in the mock draft database. He's got to not only perform well, but he's got to change people's minds to get up that level of hump. And so that's just kind of when I see somebody that's like maybe going 6th, 7th round, and yes, he had a good year, but you just worry that the other side of that is you have somebody that is getting draft capital right now, maybe didn't have quite as good a year, but doesn't have to reach that hurdle. Maybe, if they both have the same year in year 3 or this next year, they don't have as far to climb as somebody that's, kind of getting 5th, 6th round draft capital, that type of thing. But like the profile, I think it's pretty interesting. Like you mentioned some great points on him.
Well, let's talk about a couple of profiles you don't like. And then we're going to round 2. But I do want to talk about wide receivers because that's really where we're probably down on the most. And right now, based on my grades, I do not have a first round grade on any wide receiver in the 2026 class right now. Like I just don't. In terms of the real NFL draft, I have until we see some breakouts, until we see some stuff that happens in this group. There's guys I like, but we drafted Jordan Tyson early. But big red flags for Jordan Tyson. He looked good last year. Transferred from Colorado to Arizona State. Plays with Sam Levitt. Got injured. Missed pretty much the rest of the year after December. Wasn't really playing there. So he's had injuries. He had a couple big injuries now. And Carnell Tate played behind some guys that you may have heard of. Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Buka, Jeremiah Smith. We know that routine. He had over 700 yards receiving last year, and I think people are projecting that he is that guy because before Jeremiah Smith, it was Carnell Tate. I want everybody to know that. Like, Cardell was their guy. They got from out there in Chicago. Like, he was the recruit, and they loved him, and he's still going to be good. I guarantee he gets 1,000 yards this year. So, like, I like both of these picks here, but a lot of mystery with these guys. And when you're looking at kind of how we did draft some early second-round guys that we'll get into, but these two are kind of in a tier to itself, I guess, but it's not like a huge tier.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The tough part is normally in these drafts, you'd see a bunch of wide receivers just from a positional value perspective. We'd want to try and get our good QBs. We'd want to hit on a couple of running backs, and we want to hit some really good wide receivers. And the fact that we only have 2 here kind of says a little something about, how we feel about this class. I think you're spot on about first round draft picks. Although if you go out and look at the mock draft database, there's still first round wide receivers. So people are expecting some of these wide receivers to go, but when you actually dig in and look at the data and look at the talent, maybe we're not quite there. And maybe where the mock drafters go eventually over time is closer to how we're kind of viewing this, which is, this is not that great of a wide receiver class for the 2026 class. Hopefully we get some production and we get some guys to break out, like you mentioned, but really there's just very questionable profiles. When we're talking about Jordan Tyson and Carnell Tate, the thing that worries me about Jordan Tyson has a pretty good data profile. The injuries are the piece that worries me. I think that's a big knock. I think you have to keep that in mind. The upside is great, but I do think that you have to keep that in mind. I think he would be a candidate for wide receiver 1 in this class. I think Carnell Tate is a candidate for wide receiver 1 in this class, but that's more on ability and hope because he's played behind some really, really good players at Ohio State. He's starting and he's playing a lot, but he is not getting the market share that you normally see and you'd be confident about a profile. So for him, it's do you make an exception for this wide receiver room in terms of market share, because he's not getting the market share you'd like to see. Normally you'd see from somebody that you'd really want to draft in the first round. So like to 17, 18 targets per route run is kind of where he is. And if you're in college, that might be something good in the NFL for, get you to wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 range. But in college, you want to see more dominance, and we're not seeing dominance from him yet in terms of this offense. And I do think that is largely just a function of you playing with Jeremiah Smith, you're playing with Emeka Buka, you're playing with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, it's tough.
Yeah.
And can you, in that situation, can you make an exception from the data to give this guy that thing? Because wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 at Ohio State is important and probably could go off into the NFL and do well, regardless of how much he was able to produce in college. And so I think that might be worthy of an exception. But anytime you're trying to make an exception for the case, that makes it harder. There's basically just a big question mark there. I'd love to see him put up some good numbers this year. If that happens, I'm going to get more excited about his profile. Young, and he's got a lot of ability there at Ohio State. So we'll see how this year plays out. But I'm excited. Just there's caution here. Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate, maybe some of these other guys. We're going to talk about them here in a second, but maybe some of these other guys. But it's there's just question marks, and you just have to be wary of taking those guys too early with all those question marks.
Yeah. That's the thing. There's a lot of hope in this class. And I don't like hope, Jay. Like, I don't like, oh, well, I hope he does this. I hope he does this. Like, if he does this, that's good. We keep hearing with these profiles. That scares me, right? When you think of the first round guys, like, I could go through every single one of these first 12 players that we have up here and be like, I hope this is what they do this year. I hope Sellers takes this step. I hope this, I hope this. Like, that's the scary part about the class. That's why we keep reiterating, like, I don't, like, people are going to pop off. There's going to be guys there. So I don't want to say, like, oh, just sell the picks. But if you can get a legitimate dynasty asset, those are the things that you do. Like, I think that this is the class where I'm pretty comfortable saying that. All right, let's get a second round. This is where it gets a little bit off the rails here. So we get once the second round hit. This is the first time I've done this. Now I've done this for 5 years as an analyst doing content. I've done it longer than that, but as far as content wise, and this is the first time I've felt so uncomfortable in the second round. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Like, I have my rankings, but I still felt uncomfortable. So at 201, we had Jay Knott, running back out of Oklahoma. 202, Justice Haynes, running back out of Michigan. 203, Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver out of USC. 204, Eric Singleton Jr., wide receiver out of Auburn. Mekhi Hughes, running back out of Oregon at 205. He's from Tulane. Antonio Williams, wide receiver out of Clemson, 206. Eugene Wilson, wide receiver out of Florida. 208 is Evan Stewart out of Oregon. 209 is Nick Harbor, a South Carolina wide receiver / tight end / I don't know, track star. 210, Quentin Joyner, running back out of Texas Tech. 211 is Katron Allen, Penn State running back. Feel like he's been in college forever. He's like a Kansas power forward from back in the day. And then 212, Dante Moore, quarterback at Oregon, who played a little bit his freshman year at UCLA, did not play last year. People are expecting big things from him. So there's a lot of projection, a lot of hope. That's going to be the name of this episode. Hope. That's why I was going to put hope on the thumbnail. But what's your general takeaway from this round, Jay?
What's the Star Wars clue? I don't know. I just watched Andor. It's like rebellions are built on hope or something like that. Yeah, that's a good theme for the 2026 class. Hope. Yeah, I think I echo those same sentiment. It's like it's scary picking some of these players. Now I'm gonna have my preferences in this group, but it's a really a lot of hope and maybes out of this guy. You see us go for some quarterbacks and wide receivers here, which is kind of our bread and butter. We just snuck in a quarterback at the end on the hope, but good offenses like Oregon's going to be relevant. He sat behind Dylan Gabriel last year. That's one of those situations where maybe the setup might be okay, and I still don't know if he's a good player or not, but you might get a good situation there in Oregon. So I think that's interesting. But there's like we rattled off a whole bunch of wide receivers in this group. You got Mekhi Lemon, who I think is a really, really interesting prospect. We do need to see some performance out of this year. Eric Singleton, I think from a data perspective, actually looks pretty good. I like that profile. He's moving on to Auburn this year. And so Auburn has a pretty good wide receiver room. I think he'll probably lead that wide receiver room. Cam Coleman's pretty good. Maybe he'll be the second wide receiver there in that room. He'll offer something a little different than Cam Coleman. But that's a profile that's pretty interesting to me. Antonio Williams, Eugene Wilson, Evan Stewart. I don't know if you classify Nick Harbor in there. Well, that was a pretty decent, sizable run on wide receivers. And like we said, there's lots of question marks, but there are some interesting profiles. Eric Singleton Jr., Antonio Williams, even Eugene Wilson, Mekhi Lemon. I like all those things. One thing I'd say is these are all pretty light guys. Some of them are even short and light. So this next group of wide receivers, typically you'll see them in the slot. They might have a low A dot. Maybe some of them have a decent yak, but for the most part, this is a very, very light group. Think of guys that you see in the NFL that end up playing the slot position for that. So just something to keep in mind. We are going to get to some bigger wide receivers here coming up, but this next tier of wide receivers, this is a sort of small, light type of group of wide receivers.
And that's a tough thing to project, right? We've been trying to project that for years, and it's hard because you get guys like Tyreek, you get some of these other guys that pop off as slot guys, and then you get those guys like Rondale Robinson, all these other guys that just, they are what they are, but they're wide receiver 3-4s, right? And that's what I think the worry is. Should I have any hope for Evan Stewart anymore, Jay? Because he looked good against Ohio State. The one game, he was there. I mean, and you know me, I was a big Evan Stewart guy, just like I was Golden. I mean, I used to argue Golden, Evan Stewart forever. And Golden, hey, first round, I'll take that. I'll take that win. But I mean, when you're looking at Evan Stewart's profile, last 3 years, freshman year was probably his best year. 53 catches, 650 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2023 quarterback play at Texas A&M wasn't great. 38 catches, 500 yards, 4 touchdowns. This last year at Oregon, really, really poor performance. I mean, I don't want to say poor, but 613 yards, 5 touchdowns is not like what we were expecting from him. He had first round capital. That's what people thought he was going to be. And just wasn't great, right? Had some big games. Wisconsin, the Ohio State game, he was okay. Did okay, but we need to see him really produce here. And second round, Evan Stewart, I like a little bit more just because of the value, but I don't know. What do you think about him?
Yeah, the shining light that you still have from Evan Stewart is he had a really good year one. From a year one perspective, he had a really high dominator rating, a good reception yards per team pass attempt. So from a market share perspective, year one was pretty good. So I'm going to hang my hat on that because, if then you have a early breakout, so to say, and then you have in year 4, you have something that's better, something that's good. That's going to be a decent profile. Okay. Knock that against some of these other profiles where you don't see very much of anything. And then year 4 or year 5, you get a jump. He at least showed you something in year 1. So I don't think it's a total zero, but the thing about Evan Stewart is the sentiment game type of thing, because when after that first year, he rose to Devy first round status. Is he wide receiver 1 of this class? Should he be above some of these 2025 guys, some of these 2027 guys? At that point, you kind of get all hyped up, and you either acquired him at that level, you drafted him at that level, and then you saw this sort of fall off, and it sort of builds in momentum in a negative direction. And so the value on Evan Stewart, I think, in terms of people buying him, is not going to be that great, just because the sort of the momentum is sort of the negative zone. So, does his profile end up shaking up, pretty decent at the end of the day, and maybe he gets draft capital, and if he has a great, 4th year, I'll still be interested in the profile. The problem is that in the Devy realm, he's going to have this asterisk by his name of he's, he lost me a ton of value. If you don't play with anybody in Devy and you just are picking this up and you didn't have any experience with Evan Stewart and you're just looking at the 2026 rookie draft, maybe you can kind of put the blinders on and not have known about that, or not seen it, or not had any of that bias in your opinion. Then maybe we get to a point where that value can then increase and rise when you have a whole bunch of people that hadn't seen that sort of fall type of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. If you haven't been burned by that man, this is great. 208, wide receiver 1 on Oregon, possibility, he has opportunity, right? DeCorian Moore is there. Gary Bryant, some of these other guys, but there's opportunity
Yeah.
there for him. The one thing before we move into the third round, we went deeper on the first round because there's the first round guys. I do not understand the Quentin Joyner love fest out there. So like you know what's the worst part about this? I don't know if you know Brandon Lejeune, Devy Deep Dive. He's my guy. I love him. But he has an analyst in his group that used to just like hate on Quentin Joyner all the time. And I used to defend Quentin Joyner when he went to USC. I was like, hey, he's not bad. Like, he's a pretty good running back. Like, he's a guy that I think can fit in that system and whatever. Then he transfers to Texas Tech. And now people are talking like this guy's like a top 5 back all of a sudden, or top 3 in the class. And I don't even think that, to be honest with you, he's better than Jacoby Williams, who's their backup running back. Jacoby's probably a faster, better pass catcher in an air raid-ish type offense there. So to me, Quentin Joyner is getting, not in this mock, 210 is perfectly fine. Like I'm not crapping on that at all. What I'm saying is, like, I've been seeing him go like late first value, like getting some top 5 buzz there. I don't see that with Quentin Joyner's profile. It reminds me a ton of, who was the Maryland running back that the people like? The fat guy? Hemby. Roman Hemby. Like, it reminds me a little bit of that profile a little bit. Not to say he's fat. I'm fat, but like the bigger guy, bigger running back.
Yeah, so I think we're still at an unknown with Joyner. I think the why I say unknown is he only has 82 attempts over those 2 seasons. So 18 attempts and 64 attempts. So we just don't know. So any type of projection of him going in the first round is just that. It's a projection. I think his talent level from watching him in high school, or what I saw from him in his limited attempts, what I'd hang my hat on for him is like some of the efficiency stuff is pretty great. Like I'm talking best in the class type stuff. So he had 7.2 yards per attempt. That's higher than everybody in this class. The problem is it's only on 82 attempts. So you can't really extrapolate that to some of these other guys, like say, Darius Taylor, who has 342 attempts. Like, okay, give Quentin Joyner 342 attempts, or another 200 attempts or 100 something attempts this year, and we'll see if that 7.2 sticks. But he also has a yards after contact per attempt of over 4, which is nice. The really good elusive rating on the limited carry, so 153 elusive rating. So like there are things to like if you go through and pick out some of those things that you like, but the problem is it's just on such low volume. You have 80 some attempts. Like, can you extrapolate that to him being the number 1 back over the course of a season? And does that continue? I don't know. I'm not sure. The data says maybe, because there are some nuggets in there. It's not a sure thing for sure.
The word you're looking for is hope, Jay. There's hope out there possibly for him. I mean, Nick Harbor, another one. I don't really know what he is. I really wish he would go to tight end, because that would help me out in some leagues where it's like, hey, I draft you as a tight end. And the other one, and then we'll go to the third round. Justice Haynes. I love Jordan Marshall, the sophomore running back out of Michigan. Justice Haynes looked like he was special at Alabama, kind of. Like his first 2 years, there was moments where you saw him in that rushing offense with Michigan, offensive line, everything there. I do think Justice Haynes could pop himself back into the top 4 running backs. Like, and I mean, at times, Justice Haynes was running back 1, right? So like there is opportunity for Haynes to kind of get himself back into that first round category.
I agree.
All right, let's go to third round. So 301, Jacoby Lane, wide receiver out of USC. 302, Zachariah Branch, wide receiver out of Georgia Bulldogs. Still feels weird to say Georgia Bulldogs. And third round for Zachariah Branch, who was supposed to be the wide receiver 1. 303, Aaron Anderson, LSU Tigers. 304, CJ Baxter, he's a running back out of Texas. 305, Isaiah Horton, Alabama wide receiver. He transferred from Miami. Denzel Boston, wide receiver out of Washington. 307, Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana Hoosiers. 308, Jeremy Bernard, wide receiver out of Alabama. 309, Nick Anderson, LSU Tigers wide receiver. 310, Jam Miller from Alabama, running back. Brandon Ennis, wide receiver, Ohio State. 311, Casey Concepcion, wide receiver out of Texas A&M. 312, he's at Texas A&M. He transferred from NC State. Again, a lot of question marks here, but I will say the one guy that I go back and forth on, just to start this off, Jacoby Lane out of USC, I keep going back and forth on in terms of what he could be. 6'4", 195. He brings that size, that frame that you really like to see there. Had a great end of the year, 127 yards and 3 touchdowns in that Las Vegas Bowl. And will look good against Mekhi Lemon. I think him and Mekhi Lemon are going to be a great 1-2 punch. The big question for me with Lane is, can he really be a separator? That's like his contested catches is really where it's at. And it makes me nervous what his contested catches stuff is, because when you're looking at it, like that's pretty much his game, which is not going to translate very well over to the NFL side, because he needs to show that separation, that explosion. But I don't mind getting him in the 3rd round. There's a lot of hopefuls in this group here. But what is your take in the 3rd round here? A lot of wide receivers. This is where we took our wide receiver shots.
Yeah. Zachariah Branch was pretty much the consensus wide receiver 1 of this class coming in. And, he went to USC. It didn't quite work out. Now we have him at Georgia. But he, coming into, his career from high school to college, he did something different with the ball in his hands. The problem is they wasn't utilized, or maybe, they just didn't see it with him. But he didn't get his use at USC. And there's a couple guys that have now moved on from USC. Maybe it's because Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane are better. But it's also Zachariah Branch, there is something different about him. Now, again, he's light and small, or lightish, and not tall, wide receiver. So we'll see what happens, but this is a guy that needs to produce. Like it can only get you, your talent levels and all that stuff can only get you so far. He needs to become a wide receiver at Georgia and actually produce on the field. I think that's interesting. CJ Baxter, to me, he had a pretty good first season. He was actually a starter for Texas as a true freshman. He did suffer an injury, but between his freshman year and sophomore year, it's all any of the beat writers could talk about is how great CJ Baxter was going to be that next year. Goes down with a season-ending injury, and now we've all kind of forgot about him. But anytime you have one of those running backs that gets one of those injuries, you never know if they're going to come back to where they were. But this guy was clearly at the very top end of this running back class coming in as a freshman. He starts his freshman year at Texas. Tons of uncertainty. Can he make it back? There's a couple guys there in Texas in terms of a crowded backfield. You had Trey Wisner kind of do well last year, quietly really well. And you got some guys that were in the year after him, like Jarek Gibson, and some other guys that are coming in this year that are pretty interesting as well. So it's just a very loaded room. You hope CJ Baxter can to mix it up this year with Trey Wisner and Jarek Gibson and some of these other guys. But they're like I said, they're like we've been saying, that's a hope. He certainly has the talent, but can he come back from the injury? I think those are two interesting guys, Zachariah Branch and CJ Baxter, who was, if you were doing this draft when these guys were coming in as freshmen, you probably would have had them as wide receiver 1 and running back 1, or pretty close to those levels.
Yeah.
That's kind of where consensus was. And now we're picking them up in the 3rd round because there's so much uncertainty between these guys.
Yeah, the other one too, Aaron Anderson's a guy that I've liked for a long time, at LSU. It's a crowded room. It is a crowded room there. But he's not getting a ton of love out there and Devy spots and other stuff out there. But I mean, this is the type of class for him to rise up in, right? Like he's talking about explosive plays. I mean, he gets the football, he's going for 50 yards if he has any open space. Like that's the explosiveness there. The other one that's getting a ton of buzz that I want to mention out there, I do all the 247 reports on our Substack. I kind of dive into it. Isaiah Horton's getting some love, Jay. I don't know if you've looked at his model yet. I mean, I know he's down here for you. But when you're looking at what Isaiah did at Miami, there was flashes. 56 catches, 600 yards, and 5 touchdowns last year. This will be his 4th year, so he is going to Alabama. But he has a hell of a connection with Ty Simpson. I guess they played ball together in high school or something, or 7-on-7. He did something 7-on-7 there. So all out of the camp, like Ryan Williams is there. We know that. They've talked about some of these other guys out there in Alabama, but the name I keep hearing a ton of during the 247 stuff is Isaiah Horton. And in a class that doesn't necessarily have like that guy at 6'4", 205, if he has a breakout year in that Alabama offense, you're talking about a riser.
Yeah. It's how those Alabama wide receiver room plays out this year is going to be really, really interesting. I mean, like, is Ty Simpson good enough to support all of these wide receivers that we're excited about? You got Isaiah Horton, Jeremy Bernard, who we have a couple picks later, and then of course you got Ryan Williams from the 2027 class.
Yeah.
We're taking shots. We like Alabama. We think that offense could be good. If a lot of times you hear what happens in spring ball, you hear what happens, you get a transfer, you get the connection, and you get some magic, and something goes off, and Isaiah Horton could be that guy. But I think the Alabama room is Ryan Williams first. So for the same reason that we kind of say the same thing about sort of Carnell Tate, you might have all the talent in the world, but I think Ryan Williams is the guy there. And then who eats after him? It could very well be Isaiah Horton. And then you have Jeremy Bernard here going a couple picks later. But one name I wanted to mention, Denzel Boston. I think that's another interesting profile. He's tall, he's big, he's 6'4", 209 pounds. So we mentioned Jacoby Lane. We talked about how in the second round you had a whole bunch of small wide receivers. I think if you're looking, you had a big rise from like a guy like Jaden Higgins this last year because he offered that sort of that size piece of the profile that some of the other small wide receivers didn't have. And Denzel Boston then could be one of those guys that, he has that size element, and not all the NFL teams need the small guy. Some of them need the outside guy, the big guy, and I like the Denzel Boston profile. It's not perfect that he didn't show up for very much for the first 2 years. This third year, though, was pretty interesting. He hits above some of the age-adjusted metrics that I like for year 3, and the weighted dominator, EP play, stuff like that. So that's one that I do think that if he has another good year like he had in year 3, kind of puts up those good numbers, I think he could be a riser because he has that unique size at that position.
Yeah, no, he could be. The other guy, do you want to mention before we get to this fourth round, wrap this thing up? Fernando Mendoza, Indiana quarterback. I have not gotten into him yet. I just started my article today, just kind of dived into the background a little bit. I've watched him because he played at Cal, so I've gone to a few of his games, and I'm going to tell you right now, nothing from what I saw on the field gave me scream first round quarterback, but I could be wrong because it is what it is. I had my kids with me. There's a whole experience going to games. And so I'm going back into all 22. I just started. I'm going to get it out this week sometime, hopefully at the end of the week. And because Fernando Mendoza, Nate Tice has him as QB1 without Arch Manning. And all these guys are now starting to draft in PFF. I think the numbers for PFF have popped off there. And now we're starting to see a little bit of love there. So I wanted to draft him just so I could say, hey, Mendoza is one of those guys that is getting a little bit buzzed. Now, we've seen this before, right? Tyler Shuck, he got a second round capital. We've seen this with guys before that kind of come out of nowhere. He's in Indiana now, so he's in a Kirk Cinetti offense that's going to definitely throw the football. Haven't dived too much into his film yet. Full disclosure, I just have not. But I do want to mention him as like another quarterback that is getting a ton of buzz out there.
And supporting cast-wise, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper Jr. Those are some good wide receivers. So, I think that he does have good pass catchers there to kind of feed that if that does end up working out.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the fourth round, and we'll wrap this thing up. First tight end off the board. We just took one because what the hell? Kenyon Sadiq, Oregon tight end out there, has a ton of potential though. He's probably tight end one right now in the class. Dane Key, former Kentucky wide receiver. He's at Nebraska at 402. Barian Brown, former Kentucky wide receiver at LSU now at 403. Luke Haas, tight end at Ole Miss at 404. Mark Fletcher, running back from Miami at 405. J.C. Brown, 406, Kansas State. Deuce Robinson, wide receiver at Florida State, 407. 408 was Deion Burks. He was hurt last year. He played for Oklahoma. Tyler Brown, Clemson wide receiver at 409. I think he's a sleeper. I think people need to know that name a little bit. 410, Elijah Surratt, which is who Jay talked about for the Indiana Hoosiers. 411, Sawyer Robertson, Baylor quarterback, is another one that's getting a little bit of buzz out there that you should know. And then, of course, Jay took Max Clare, tied in out of Ohio State. He's got to take his Buckeye to wrap this up. So what's your takeaway about this fourth round, Jay?
We finally get some tight ends in here. At the Devy Royale, we usually hate on tight ends a lot. I think a lot of tight end performance usually comes down to where they get drafted and what their athleticism is for me. And it's really hard to get that data sort of until you're going through the draft evaluation process. A lot of times tight ends don't produce very well in college. Just the way the college offenses work, usually, the feature the wide receivers. There's not a lot of tight end production, maybe like a Brock Bowers or Kyle Pitts or stuff like that. You just don't see too much of that in terms of owning the passing piece of an offense from the tight end position, especially early on. So it's really hard to to judge those guys. I think that there's a spot for Kenyon Sadiq. I really liked him. I think there's a spot for him to do really well this year. You have Ferguson going off and getting drafted. I think that this could be a good spot for Kenyon Sadiq, and they used him really well last year, and you could tell how athletic he was when he did get the ball. So I think he is pretty interesting. I can't quit Luke Haas. He's in a new system now at Ole Miss. I think that he could be pretty interesting, and so those are guys. I don't know if you would count Nick Harbor or Deuce Robinson. They're kind of tweeners. Both of those guys. So we when they were coming in as freshmen, they were tweeners. I do think that Deuce and Nick are now categorized as wide receivers, but those are two guys that are kind of interesting as for those perspective. The guy that I'll call out here in this group is Dane Key. Dane Key has a great data profile. He has, surprisingly to me, because I really like Barian Brown after the first year. Dane Key has been the former Kentucky wide receiver that has put together market share, put together EPA per play on a consistent basis for those 3 years. So that's the guy that, like, from a data perspective, the problem is that his draft capital is in the tanks. I don't know, maybe people aren't excited about his profile, but that's a guy that's a really good data profile that could be on the rise if he has a good year here in Nebraska with Dylan Raiola. Maybe he puts something together that might be interesting. But again, we're taking him here in the fourth round here. So that tells you kind of how we feel about it. But data wise, it's an interesting one.
It is. I think Dane has been the better Kentucky wide receiver the last couple of years over Barian Brown. Like, he just has. I think he has a really good profile, like in terms of being like that X guy probably, and just like athletic enough. So yeah, maybe we are a little lower on him. I'm interested to see what he does with Dylan Raiola though. Right, like we'll see what that offense looks like there. And I like Luke Haas a lot. Like, I think that that tight end is a great. These tight ends are great to grab. Max Clary probably is the best. He was the best tight end last year in the Big Ten. Well, besides Loveland-ish, but he was in there. Like, when you think of what he was able to do at Purdue, now these Ohio State. The problem with Ohio State, Jay, just as well as I do, they don't use the freaking tight ends. Now he might be fourth option, but when you have freaking Mylan Graham and Ennis and Tate and Jeremiah Smith and your boy Quincy Porter, all these guys, it's hard to throw tight ends the ball that much. So like the big thing for him is just be efficient. And if he does that, I mean, you're talking about maybe a guy that can go in the second round. Like, it would not shock me to see Max go in the second round next year.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I'd mention is like you have a whole bunch of outside wide receivers that are freaking amazing at Ohio State. Brandon Inniss is coming in, and the hope is that he's your slot guy,
Yeah.
and he kind of takes that Emeka Ibuka role. I think he can, but what if like Emeka Ibuka's targets that consistency, that guy that you go to for first downs? What if that guy is your is Max Clare instead, that guy that offers that consistent over the middle type of production that you needed. That's the only upside there. It's the last pick in the fourth round. There's a whole bunch of other guys you could have taken here to make it a point. I just think that I've seen, the Buckeyes, got him in the transfer portal. He had a good year at Purdue. They paid
Yeah.
some
Oh,
money
yeah.
to get him. They'll probably use him. And so, like, does he have a statistical, like a crazy statistical, like in my projections, would I say he's going to be like the best numbers wise from the tight end position? Probably not, but he can show enough to
Yeah.
get the draft capital, get the and display his athleticism so that he becomes relevant next year.
Well, I mean, I think they paid him like 1 million. I thought I heard a number out there like 1 million, but I mean, I could be wrong. And I also across the board. But if they did that, they invested in him. The two other guys I do want to mention, one is Tyler Brown from Clemson, and we mentioned the other guys. We've mentioned Wesco Moore and Antonio Williams. People forget that Tyler Brown is a freshman in 2023. He led Clemson in receptions. He had 52. He had over 531 yards and 4 touchdowns. And when you're thinking of that, so he was the 5th Clemson freshman to basically get 50 catches in a season since Antonio Williams, Artavius Scott, Sammy Watkins, and DeAndre Hopkins. That is pretty good company to be in. Now, the room is crowded beyond crowded. I mean, we're talking about 4 wide receivers here that are legitimate. So I don't know if the production's going to be there, but if you're looking for like a guy that could be just that NFL guy, that one that does great at the Senior Bowl or just performs well in like those type of like atmospheres. Oh man, this guy can create separation. Oh, he's explosive. That's part of it. Like that's, I think, where you're looking at. He had an ankle injury. He had to have surgery last year. So he just played in 4 regular season games. But Tyler Brown, and he's been tearing it up in spring. Like Dabo Sweeney said, this is the best I've ever seen Tyler Brown. Now, Dabo saying that, I don't know. I don't know if you trust Dabo. Like he's Dabo, but he is talking about like he's proud of him. He bounced back. I know the spring reporters, they've been talking about Tyler Brown as being kind of that guy that's creating a ton of separation. And the one thing about this offense, you got TJ Moore, Antonio Williams, and Wesco out there. You're going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities for Tyler Brown against possibly a nickel, possibly a linebacker, possibly the third corner, second corner on the defense. I mean, there's going to be opportunities for him if Klubnik can get him the football to be explosive. And so that's the guy I definitely wanted to point out. And then Mark Fletcher, running back from Miami, first 2 seasons, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns. I know that he had a Liz Frank for a little while there, so he got injured 2 years ago, I believe it was, but he's averaged just over 5 yards per attempt. Mark Fletcher's another one. And I know people love Jordan Lyles there. They love kind of what that running back room looks like. And it's definitely, it's definitely crowded. But when you're thinking of like what they could possibly be there, this is a great area to kind of get a guy like Fletcher in the 4th round, and kind of be that guy.
Yeah, if I'm correct there, he's big guy. I think he's
Yeah, he's a big
225
boy.
pounds.
Yeah.
So anytime, in terms of checking off the boxes in terms of, size for running backs, he definitely checks that box. And then, if the talent matches production on the field, that there's a potential possibility of him hitting this year on that stuff. Then it, you start checking off some of those boxes, and then you can see a rise. So yeah, definitely make a bet on him if down in the 4th round. Not much of a risk there, but at running back for size, if you're above 205, 208, something like that, that's when you can start making bets on guys that might own a running back room for a season, and so Fletcher might be one of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I know Jordan Lyle's there and people really like him, but I think Fletcher's their guy starting out. Like 6'2", he's listed at 6'2", 225. He's probably 6 foot-ish, 6'1", 220. But still, I mean, he's a big boy. And if he stays healthy, that's a big part of it there. All right, last part here. I didn't tell Jay we're gonna do this. We're gonna do it quickly though. Here are some guys that we didn't draft. So these guys are off the board, but we didn't draft them. I'm just gonna go through quarterbacks real quick. Carson Beck's out there. Jackson Arnold, Aiden Childs, probably not coming out. John Mateer, Avery Johnson, Connor Wiegman, Ty Simpson, Gunnar Stockton, Jaden Maivia. At the running back position, some guys that we didn't draft. Trey Wisner, he's probably the starting running back for Texas. Probably, I don't know how that room's going to work out. Jaheim White from West Virginia, Le'Veon Moss, Ruben Owens from Texas A&M as well, Dylan Edwards from Kansas State. Wide receiver wise, we did get a lot of them, but like Malachi Fields is out there. Jaden Greathouse from Notre Dame, super athletic. I've talked about him. He had a pretty good playoff last year. He's someone to note. DeAndre Moore from Texas might be the sleeper of everybody in there. Wingo's a little banged up. Moore is going to be that junior-ish type player that's been in the system for a long time. And then from the wide receiver or tight end position, we didn't really draft anybody, but Eli Stowers is getting a little love at Vanderbilt. Jack Indries, he's out there. Lawson Lucky, Oscar Delt from Georgia. RJ Maryland is another one from SMU. We had a great start of the year last year, got banged up. He's a very, very solid athletic guy to kind of watch out there. Of those names, you could just pick one, Jay. I know it's hard for you to pick one, but anybody stand out to you at all?
But you mentioned Trey Wisner. Is that how you say it? Y or Wisner? Yeah. Wisner.
Wisner, I think. My bad. Wisner,
I think that's interesting. I think because maybe he has the if he's the starting, if he gets the first crack, and there's a lot of things to like about the profile. It's just like the crowded room has me worried, and then I know that the talent at CJ Baxter is something that's also special, and does he come back or make it back or not? That's a little scary, but that's one I'd say. Jaheim White is somebody that's done some things. So some of these running backs I do like. I think those are interesting. Aiden Childs was somebody that was really, really high on last year. He did not take a step up. In fact, I think he took a step back last year.
Yes,
but he's got Nick Marsh, and I do think that he's got like a lot of physical tools, and if the development catches up to what that he can do, I think that's a pretty interesting prospect over time. But I think that might be one that kind of needs to develop. But yeah, I like some of these running backs that are left on there, and there's still some upside quarterbacks that, like we mentioned, Jackson Arnold and Aiden Childs. I think those are interesting guys if they hit now. And Jackson Arnold's in a new spot too there at Auburn, but you got to see the hit. And so maybe some of these guys hit, maybe some of these don't, but there's some decent ones out there still.
Yeah, no, and that's a fun part. Yeah, that's the exciting part of here to do this. Talk about Wisner, 1,000 yards rusher last year, and that's the type of thing. Hey, he's got that production there. I'm always interested in the quarterbacks. I'm not quitting on you, Connor Wiegman and Jackson Arnold. I still think there's opportunity. You could do it. I mean, Connor's at Houston. It's one of those things. But Jackson, you got everything there, buddy. Let me tell you what, Jackson. Just throw the ball to Cam Coleman. Like, if all else fails, you just throw it up to Cam Coleman here, because that guy is an absolute stud there. So, all right, that's a 2026 rookie mock. We got into it. We talked about kind of where your values are at. Go check out our Substack. Go check out our Patreon. Jay just dropped his clusters, his new Dynasty Investor month article this month. He dropped it finally. We got him out of retirement from writing, and it's great. He dropped a tool. It's really cool to see. It's over on our Patreon. You can find those links below. A comment below. Who are we missed? Who are we too high on, too low on? Maybe there's some Quentin Joyner's truthers out there that want to yell at me in the comments. That's always a plan. So we're planning on next week, as long as my health stays focused. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking, I don't know what we're talking about. We're getting the dog days of summer. We'll be in June, but we're going to have some fun anyway. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys in the next show.